Shubhankar for such a great discussion. And frankly, I would say everyone, that it is great to see other people joining. There are other companies which are joining in this domain in India. And as we said in our last discussion, that we Clear Meat completely believes, that collaboration is the only way. And we are already working with My Works. We have already started the discussion with Mr. Kadumani, and that's how the world is going to change, and that's how the sector in India is going to change. So without further ado, I'll probably move to our next session. So our next session is on policy and IP, India and global perspective. At the end, we all know, that the regulations, the regulatory world is going to change and has to improve a lot before, this sector gets aligned. So the next session is going to be managed by Ahmed Khan. He's the founder and editor of Cell Agri. It's amazing page, and I myself is a fan. So yeah. So over to you, Ahmed. Take care of the. We are going to have a very good session right now lined up. Thank you, everyone.
And wonderful. Thank you to the ClearMe team and the organizers of virtual conference for having me be part of it, and for having this really interesting panel discussion. For those who don't know, my name is Ahmed Khan. I'm the founder and editor of a platform called Cell Agri, and we track all the different companies and players in this future food cellular agriculture space, including the cell culture meat ecosystem all around the world. As companies and players have emerged in this, looking to this field of using animal cells to grow meat directly, there's been an explosion of interest all around the world. Companies across North America, Europe, and across Asia are looking to explore how we can use novel technology to help create a more sustainable future of food systems. And while that is fascinating, one area that needs to be addressed for this field moving forward is the idea of policy. How can we establish the right platforms to help not just ensure that this field is going to be safe for consumers moving forward, that companies making products with the technology know what they need to do, and policies to all help advocate and promote this field for a sustainable future. I'm really excited to have these panelists here right now with expertise in the different areas of policy within India and around the world as well, so we can start looking into that topic specifically. To get started, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give an introduction to themselves, their work in the future food space, and I'm looking forward to this panel discussion. Chinmayee, let's start off with you.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon all, and pleasure to be here. It just happened that Parul heard me at one of the conference and she called me for this in the session. So thank you, Parul, for this. I'm Chinmayee Deulgaonkar, and I head the American company FoodChain ID's Indian and Middle East operations. We are into certification, DNA testing, regulatory services, and catering to nearly 40,000 plus food companies across the globe. I'm personally part of many ISO, BIS, FSSI committees in framing standards, regulations, etc. And thank you so much. Pleasure to be here in this new topic of cell culture. Thank you. Over to you, Ahmed.
Hey, thank you. Sanjay, it'd be great to hear an introduction.
You could not hear?
No, that was great. Sanjay, it'd be great to pass on to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjay Sethi. I'm the Executive Director of Plant-Based Foods Industry Association. This is a new association formed about a year ago. We have 100 members and we are working in the plant-based food space. We are also part of International Plant-Based Food Working Group, which is an international grouping of some of the countries, mainly from the West, which have been a part of this movement on plant-based foods. And I'm very happy to be part of this discussion on plant-based and new cell culture-based meat.
Hey, thank you, Sanjay. Simcha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Hello, everybody. I would like to thank ClearMeat for inviting me as a speaker. My name is and I represent an animal rights organization, Gaia, from Belgium, Europe, and I work for them as an external consultant on societal transitions, alternative proteins, and cultured meat.
Hey, thank you, Simcha. And Vikrant, before we get started, passing the floor to you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vikrant Rana. I manage a law firm called Rana and Company, and we specialize in IP and corporate laws. And we have seen a lot of action on, on both fronts, IP as well as corporate, from plant-based, protein-based companies in India now.
Hey, wonderful. With a panel like this, we're really looking forward to our discussion moving about the policy space in India and globally. But before we get started as well, to the audience tuning in right now, please feel free to submit your questions to the panel. I believe you can ask your questions using the WhatsApp button on the ClearMeat website or through the YouTube live as well. There may be an option in other places as well to submit your questions, and we're looking forward to seeing them. Please keep asking them, and I'll try to include many of them as possible to our panelists. So to get started, to understand how policies within India can support the sustainable and future meat space with cell agriculture and cell cultured meat, it would be great to understand what the current policy landscape looks like for alternative and plant-based proteins within India. Sanjay, what is the current landscape in India to support the development and growth of plant-based alternatives?
Yeah, so Indian government has been at the forefront of saving the Indian enterprises and providing amazing safe food to the consumer, and at the same time providing a good opportunity for the farmers to flourish, even the small farmers. In this sector, the agriculture has been also including dairy and meat sector. So although those sectors were not like a traditional agriculture, but within the parlance of agriculture, this definition included them. So last 10 to 15 years, we saw a lot of growth in dairy and poultry. And as a result, a lot of support which was meant for the traditional agriculture farmers went to these farmers. Similarly, on the consumer side, the government wanted to do a lot of things so that people get the safe food, because the street food was tasty, but it was unsafe. So the small and medium enterprises were good at providing tasty food, but not good at providing the safe food. So they came out with various laws and providing a policy framework and recently by a vegan food mark. So it only meant that the bigger organizations will be able to provide the safer food much better as compared to the smaller organization, because they wouldn't have the HACCP certification, they wouldn't have those kind of conditions which are necessary to provide those kind of certification. So on two accounts, one on the farmer side and both on providing the vegan logo, the small and medium enterprises, the startups, those who wanted to provide plant-based foods, they were at a disadvantage. The third thing came about providing support through Mega Food Park and various other schemes that the government had. Even on those areas, there was no pinpointed scheme to provide such kind of a support to Indian startups. So as a result, what we saw that either the opportunities were going to outside the country. For example, Canada came out with a protein cluster, and we couldn't provide something like that in India, or they went to the bigger organization who were more adept at understanding the laws and the regulations and working together as a team. And the startups were trying to mimic the animal sources of foods through the plant-based foods, and they were struggling to just do it right. While they were struggling to do this part right, rest of the things, they had absolutely no plan. So those things which can be managed very well by big organizations, they begin to lose the advantage. And the result is that the going is becoming very, very tough for the startups in the plant-based food sector. Then came the the cell culture-based meat. And the talk went around because it has been taken apart from the animal body. That means in terms of taste, you would be able to exactly replicate because this is part of animal body in any case. So the message went to the investors that as if the cell culture-based meat would be able to mimic the taste better, so the plant-based foods again got a disadvantage there. So suddenly we realize that how do we make sure that the government looks at us? And then on top of that, some of the nomenclature issues came, and they said you cannot call it soy milk, you cannot call it the oat milk, you cannot call it almond milk, call it almond beverage. I mean, there was already a product by Amul by the name of Badam milk, because they cannot call it, they can call it Badam milk because they put milk inside, and which is where the true Badam milk, the true almond milk, cannot call itself almond milk because there is no real milk inside. It's the plant-based milk inside. Anybody who was buying, whether it was the almond milk or the plant-based milk or plant-based foods, they were not being cheated. They never bought thinking, oh, this is ghee or this is butter or this is plant-based milk or this is just milk. They always knew that this has not come from the dairy source. It has not come from the animal source. They were buying knowing fully well that this is not from the animal source, it is from the plant source. And yet the impression was created by some of the large organizations and some of the leaders in the dairy industry that as if this industry is trying to cheat, which was not the case. So what happened in the process, they utilized their influence with the government, and they successfully told the government that prevent them from using the dairy terminology. So you can see from all directions, we were squeezed in, and then came the issue of the GST. So GST on the animal sources of foods is either 5% or around that, whereas for the plant-based meat or plant-based milk, the GST is 18%. When we went to the government, they said, no. You are a processed food, and we are putting all processed food, whether from animal category or your category, into the 18% category. Yes, that is right. It looks like it's a level playing field, but it is not, because when the customer is switching from a meat to a plant-based meat, he is switching from 5% category to 18% category. So over there, the government could not provide us the level playing field. So as a result, the message went that these are the people who are very small. They cannot solve India's problem of the employment and the GDP. Why should we listen to them? So the dairy, meat, seafood, all that sector continue to remain the hog line, remain in the center of attraction, and they could influence the government and the entire ecosystem that we should be supported more than the plant-based movement. I think this is very, very unfair, which has happened to the plant-based movement, and the government must do something to ensure that these young startups don't die.
Thank you for sharing that, Sanjay. Sounds like there's quite a bit going on currently in the policy space around the relation and advocacy for plant-based milk and meat right now in India. Looking at the global picture right now, Simcha, why does Gaia, as an animal rights advocacy organization, support the idea of cultured meat and advocating for policies to promote that field within Europe?
Thank you for that question, Ahmed. Well, indeed, Gaia stands up for the welfare of animals, and to work effectively, we focus on addressing the organized mistreatment of animals. And as it is estimated that each year 80 billion land animals are slaughtered for food, and intensive livestock farming, as we all know, falls badly short of animal welfare standards, a transition towards alternative proteins, and for us that is plant-based, precision fermentation, and cultured meat or fish, is very important. So we believe that cultured meat is a part of the solution in the protein shift, because we saw in research that a large group of still wants to eat meat. So many people want to cut back in their meat consumption. They want to eat less meat or a smaller portion, but they still want to eat real meat, especially the male audience. So we think that it is really important to support cultured meat, and that is why we are lobbying. We see that global meat consumption is still going up, and food is often linked with cultural traditions and habits. It's very difficult to change that. So it's a complex transition with many challenges and opportunities. So good research and support from the government is needed for a successful transition. And that is why Gaia supports many research, and we bring out the results towards the politicians, towards Belgian politicians, but also towards the European Member of Parliament.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Simcha. I'm sure later on we can dive into some of those pieces of research and study that your team has published in the past. Looking back into India, for any policies looking at food technology, ensuring food safety standards is going to be a top priority. Chinmayee, from your experience, what are areas of concern that policymakers may have about novel food technology, and specifically looking at cell-cultured meat and novel foods like that?
Great. Thank you for that question. And where do I start? I start right from its classification, because I mean, we all know that it goes as a novel food, but then in reality, where do we really classify this? Because this doesn't come under regenerative agriculture. The regenerative agriculture requires an ecosystem to be in place, which culture meat doesn't have. So number one, the challenge that policymakers will have is, where do we really classify this culture meat, or there has to be a separate category. The second aspect that we see is about the safety. Is cultured meat safe? Probably yes, because it doesn't pass on the diseases which typically live animals brings in, and so it is so-called, free from harmful bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella, etc. But then, is it not? Does it mean that it doesn't contaminate? No, it doesn't mean that, because the culture media is full of all the growth hormones and fats and proteins, and it has got all the growth elements to it. So hygiene becomes utmost priority for cultivation of cell meat. So it cannot be just the regular hygiene standards what we have, but it will require a different set of hygiene standards for the cultured meat. Then comes the testing methods, like because it has got a number of multiple variants. This cell is not a typical muscle cell, right? So it is deprived of the structured muscle cell which a normal cell would have. And of course, the nutrition content can be altered depending upon plant requirements. It can be high fat, high protein, high vitamin, high minerals, etc. But then, what are the testing methods? How do we really test that? So that standardization of that testing methods will be another area of, let's say, look out for the regulators. And the most important part is the environmental factor, because cultured meat always has been about animal-free, cruelty-free, etc. And also it talks about the water conservation that it has got by saving the animal rearing. But one of the factor is the bioreactors in which the cell is cultivated emits hell amount of CO2. And this CO2, as compared to methane and nitrogen oxide, which is generated by the traditional conventional method, cannot dissipate in the environment the way others do. So there is high amount of CO2. So how much will be the environmental standards will also be the lookout for the policymakers. So from my perspective, these would be the challenges for the policymakers. That's over to you, Ahmed.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. When we beyond the policymakers' perspective on how to regulate this field, another area where policy comes into place is how policy can support companies as well in this process. As companies look to enter this future food space like plant-based or cell-cultured meat, what's the current regulation and policy landscape right now to support companies whether it's in terms of regulation or in terms of helping them protect their IP or their trademarks moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed. Investment, I would say, is directly proportional to the protection to IP there. On a general front, India has come up with the SIPP in 2016. That was for giving IP support to the startups. And we have seen during the last few years, a lot of plant-based protein companies have been filing their patents in India. And there's a lot of support from the government on number of factors. One is the reduction of the official fee by almost 80% there. An expedited examination procedure where you are able to get a patent granted in India within 6 months, which is much faster than many other countries. And then you have a list of facilitators on the IP India website. So you can actually, a startup can actually go to any of these registered patent agents who can guide them with the technical know-how on filing and protecting a patent. So these things have really helped in the IP side of the things, which would, I would say, correlationally lead to more investment there. But I think like what Sanjay and Chinmayee mentioned about the different regulatory issues which are there, and the government has been seized off, like even the vegan logo and the criteria for giving those vegan logo, the GST issue, the labeling issues, those are I think they're still grappling with. And what Sanjay mentioned about the milk, that milk thing, I could refer to a judgment of the EC in 2017, where in France actually they had come up with the same thing, that anything which is not coming from the milk from the animals could not be treated as milk. And probably that is being followed in other countries around the world. And it would be time, probably at an appropriate time, that the definition of milk, would it be amended to include other things or not? So that would be a big question there. But as of now, they are not treating these beverages. I mean, they're calling them beverages, but not milk. So on the regulatory front or the IP front, this would be a base for investment. These policies have to be, as such, so as to help people to invest in these particular industries and give them that kind of protection from regulatory and IP front.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you, Vikrant. That was an interesting answer. Looks like we are having quite a few questions coming in from the audience, and these are great. Keep them in, and towards the end of this session, we'll look to address as many of them as possible. Looking at the questions overall right now, one of the main ideas we're looking at is the idea of social impact. When it comes to the development of policies around cell-cultured meat, it will be important to be aware of any of the social impacts around that development, particularly novel food technologies like that. Simcha, Gaia recently concluded a study actually in Brazil looking at the social impact of alternative proteins, including cell-cultured meat. Can you please share some of those findings from that report?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Well, cultured meat, indeed, we had a study. You are talking about the Brazil study, correct? This is done by the Federal University of Rana, and we see, as I mentioned before, that it's a complex transition towards plant-based meat and cultured meat, because many parties are involved. So what we need to have an effective, good transition is a holistic and layered approach. This means that we need to address consumers, entrepreneurs, manufacturers, farmers. I will come back to that on the project of Respect Farms. Governments in an early stage support, we need that. Retailers. So the transition thinking has gaining momentum. It's quite new, and although it's a relative young field of science and is still in its infancy, we see that much research is already been done on this complex transition process. And today, Brazil is the largest exporter of beef in the world. I think about 23 export is coming from Brazil, and the second largest producer of the world after the US. So we think that it was really important to know what the feeling would be of the stakeholders in Brazil on this. And I will come back later on the details if the audience is interested for it, but we see different challenges and opportunities from the study.
Thank you for sharing that. Sanjay, have there been similar studies looking into the impact of the wider alternative protein space in India?
Yes. So if you look at the entire opportunity in India, it is not just the plant-based foods or cell culture-based food or meat. It is also the fact that Indians do not consume much of protein. So we have about 40 grams per capita per day, and we could be consuming maybe 60 grams or more. So if we were to increase the protein consumption, the performance of country in various fields will definitely go up, including in the Olympic medals, because ultimately it is protein which is a very, very big differentiating factor. So the government recognizes it, people recognize it, and that's why there is a big consumption of meat which is growing in the country, which is at 5.5 kilogram per capita, which is very, very small as compared to other countries. And if it grows to 10 kilogram or 15 kilogram, we do not have so much of extra land to grow fodder. So if we will be growing so much more fodder, that means we will be dependent on other countries to import more foods, and there will be inflation all around for the other foods also, because when a country with a 1.4 billion population goes to the market for anything, the market goes through the roof. So that means the solution of animal sources of food is just not the sustainable solution. And if we look at the alternate proteins, then you immediately go into the amino acids theory. So the amino acid theory says that animal sources of foods have all 9 amino acids, whether it's milk or egg, whereas plant-based sources do not have in one product all the whole thing. So, but there are some plant-based sources like soybean, which have got all the 9 amino acids. So if soybean has got all the 9 amino acids, why can't we look at that? But unfortunately, the most of the soybean that is grown in our country is keeping in mind the animal feed in mind, and it is also processed that way. So if we were to go outside and bring the high quality, high grade IP soybean, then we'll have to go to maybe Canada, but Canada doesn't have much of non-GM, probably US. So US has the non-GM high grade protein, so soybean. So if we bring that to the country, then probably we can look at the alternate protein sector in a big way, and slowly India can also develop its own capability to provide soybean to the protein from Indian soybean to the market for within India and also abroad. So what we have been proposing, that we bring that soybean here, keep the oil and the protein we process for Indian consumption and overseas, and that goes into the alternate protein sector also. So Indian youngsters have been consuming whey protein. Whey protein is something that in our childhood we used to consume protein and throw away the water. So the water also has some protein, and the moment the youngsters came to know, who are the gym goers, and they didn't like it. They found out, oh, we have been consuming something which was thrown away yesterday, so that means it is substandard quality, and that's why they wanted to move to now plant-based proteins. So the alternate protein is not just in the sports category or gym goer category, it's also in the normal day-to-day foods and the snacks that we consume. Snacking is on a rise in India as the consumption is rising, as the affluence is rising. So we are thinking, can we have a samosa with 10% protein? Can we have roti with 10% or 15% protein? Can we have those alternate protein things which can go inside the various foods that we have? Today, samosa is made from clarified wheat, which is considered very, very unhealthy. But can we have something like maybe Maggie or those noodles which Nestle and some companies are making. Can we have high protein noodles? So I think that trend is coming, and very soon the government also would provide some encouragement to products which are providing 10% or 15% protein. So the alternate protein is a very big category. Indians are not going to eat insects the way it is being talked about in the rest of the world. Indians will eat only the plant-based alternate proteins. And that's where the big opportunity is, whether it's Indian pulses or Indian soybean. I think that will start becoming important. But for the time being, we are looking forward to bringing the soybean from the US so that we can provide the amazing tasting, maybe tofu or those plant-based meat or soya chop, which are with the best quality, high-grade proteins, and those are there to ensure that there is no aftertaste of the soybean in the plant-based meat.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. The idea of enhancing products with protein, with different types of protein, could have quite a significant social impact moving forward. To keep moving forward on the idea of impact, I know we might be short on time, but I think this would be a really interesting topic to explore. One of the many socioeconomic questions that commonly get asked about, not just cell-cultured meat, but the wider protein space as well, is the impact this may have on farmers. Chinmayee, how do you think that would impact decision makers' perspectives on making policies in favor of future food companies and technologies, looking at the impact on farmers? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So Ahmed, it's a good question, and taking the examples Mr. Sanjay has given, we recently had a query for certifying a cookie which is infused with cricket and mealworm. So insect protein is another thing which is coming up widely in the market. You take black soldier fly larvae, and these larvae are infused with animal feed so that the animal gets a high amount of protein. So alternate proteins are being developed. So if it's not that the source is closed, in fact, the opportunities are widened for if we talk about farmers, because companies are looking out for good larvae, companies are looking out for good mealworms and cricket to infuse them with the various products. So it's just not meat. So the point is that there are alternate proteins available. Many are being new research, and so opportunities are wider. So it's just that how our ecosystem is geared up for this, educating consumers till the farm level, making sources available. I mean, even if you just take this culture meat, it is not that you just put hormones and then some kind of fat and proteins, for the muscle to grow. It requires animal source raw material so that it doesn't impact, because this cultured meat doesn't have its own immune system of its own. So you require good level of raw material. So I think it's all about how new opportunities are looked into just from the traditional conventional way to a new way of cultivation, to a new way of how the future food looks like. So that's my personal perspective, Ahmed.
Thank you for sharing that. And Simcha, Gaia recently announced a partnership with an organization looking into the impact on farmers specifically. Can you please share about that?
Yes, so one of the results that came out of the Brazilian study was that farmers are really worried about their future. So we think that it is very important to give them a perspective in cultured meat, in plant-based opportunities, what could be the future for them. And that is why Gaia is the Belgian partner for Respect Farms. And Respect Farms wants to see if it would be feasible for local farmers to produce cultured meat, so on a small scale. And first we will do a feasibility study during 18 months. And if the feasibility study is positive, then we will make a proof of concept. So I would like to invite everybody to go and check out the respectfarms.com website to find more information about that, because it's really very important that we include all the stakeholders in this transition. And the
Hey, thank you for sharing that. it looks like we're coming close to the end of time. So before we start going towards the questions from the audience, I'm going to ask all our panelists to share some of their closing thoughts about initiatives from the government and the impact on policy in the cell cultured meat and the wider future food space moving forward. Vikrant, shall we start off with your perspective from the more legal and regulatory side?
Right. I mean, yes, because if India has to be a hub of, plant-based and related products, it has to have policies which are in tune with the industry as such. Law. I mean, I remember Scorpion's song, "Two Steps Behind." Law is always 2 steps behind industry, but we have to really plan that out, that we are able to bring in those policies which take in perception of all the stakeholders involved, and have a policy which is forward looking, like the definition of vegan or the milk, and so have debate on these policies and see how we can actually have all the stakeholders on board so that the industry flourishes.
Yay. Thank you for sharing that, Vikrant. Chinmayee?
Yeah, so I would say that, I mean, if you can just if you could just repeat the question.
Sure thing. As we're wrapping up, before we jump to questions from the audience, a lot of different areas from policy around cell cultured meat and different themes we need to address moving forward for this field. It'd be great to hear some of your thoughts on what needs to happen moving forward.
Okay, so honestly, I was busy reading the questions in the chat box from the audience, so I missed on that. So it's the same question which I would, I can answer. It's not right to classify everything as just one protein, high protein products or something. We need to have segregation, plant-based, meat-based. Within meat-based, we have lab-based, because there is also a debate like whether we should really call this as cultured, use the word meat for this cultured meat. Can we use something else? So maybe there would be some kind of, some terminologies, nomenclatures that will come in. But the point is that the classification has to be separate. The standard has to be separately defined so that it becomes the specific to the process and the output of that process, and not just a generic standard of high protein with just 20% of protein content. It has to have a different standard.
Okay. Thank you for your closing comments there. Sanjay, similar question, as you're wrapping up looking at policy moving forward for alternative proteins, what do you imagine the field needs moving forward?
I think that the government needs to recognize that the startups is a reality. Government needs to realize that startups cannot stand up to big corporations. Government needs to realize that the big organizations or big sectors like dairy and meat are not going to allow these sectors to come up. Government needs to realize that if it has a responsibility towards the consumers and responsibility to the farmers, it also has a responsibility towards those young boys and girls who have set up the new startups, and they also want to survive. It is not just the farmer wants to survive or the consumer wants to have a safe food. These people also want to have some food to eat so that they can survive. There is no policy framework recognizing this. You give money for the entire sector. When you give it for the entire sector, then the other sectors come and take that money. When you give this money for the entire agriculture sector, then these organizations, which are multinational organizations, they ask their supplier to pick up that activity, because we always support the integration of the supply chain. So those which are gilded and the gold-plated startups providing support to these sectors, like big multinationals or big organizations, those startups get funded. Or those which are part of the dairy and meat sector. But these kind of startups which are bringing a change in the society through the behavior of the consumers of what they are eating, and they are helping the government to meet its target of 2070. And this is not vehicular pollution or the coal-based solution that we are talking about, that you are supporting, the way you are supporting solar organization. Similar way, you have to see this organization that they're bringing a big revolution in the society, and they need more support. than anyone else. So like you have various kinds of children. You have children which are more endowed and you have children which are less endowed. So the parents always take care of the children which are less endowed so that they also come up to the same level than the other children are. So the government has to give that special support to this sector. Otherwise, you will not be able to bring in a wholesome, sustainable change in the society.
Thank you, Sanjay. Simcha, having now looked at the policy space within India as well as the global context as well, how do you imagine the policy needs moving forward?
Yes, what I heard, and especially also from some Sanjay, is that what we see in research really confirms that. So the government really needs to support. It is essential if we don't want to end up this new technology only with the big companies. It is essential that the government supports this transition, that it creates a good atmosphere for young companies to grow in this environment, that they are providing subsidies. In Belgium, for instance, we are still funding commercials for eating meat and drinking milk. This money should go to new companies that are working on alternative proteins. So I think there is a very for the government in this process.
We came out with a cluster in Bhiwadi, the India's first plant protein cluster, and we are talking about during the AHAR conference on 14th of March and later on during 25th of May. So I request you all to kindly come and see what is happening on 14th of March in Pragati Maidan in New Delhi and support the plant protein cluster, which is India's first protein cluster in Bhiwadi.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you all for those closing words. As we can see from these discussions, there's a lot going on when it comes to policy. It's not just regulations about food safety. It's about social impact, about how can we support farmers, and also how can we support startups in this field to move forward within India and globally as well. Policy has many different angles, and we hope we were able to address as many of them as we could right now during this session. During the questions, we hope we were able to answer many of the questions that we got from the audience as well. Thank you again to the Clearme team for having us all here for this interesting discussion, and we hope and I'm looking forward to the next sessions as well. To all the panelists, thank you very much for being here. They were very fascinating answers to a wide range of questions. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I must say, Ahmed has managed the session, moderated the session really well. Thank you, all the panelists. If I have to summarize the session, I was going to say that there are really good points which were raised by everyone, regarding the alternative protein. There are plant-based protein, there are animal-based protein, there are other different kind of proteins which we have to look about. And again, saying the same thing, I keep saying that collaboration, because the market is so huge. One sector, one cluster, one company cannot cater to the market, and everyone has to move in a more hybridated, a hybrid manner. So with this, I would like to thank all the panelists, and we are here at the mid of our session. We'll take a break right now, all the audience, and we'll take a break for 30 minutes for the lunch session, and stay tuned. We are going to resume our sessions at 1:30, and the next session is going to be on market trends and consumer acceptances. So we'll join back at 1:30. Thank you, everyone. Take care.